Changing Minnesota from blue to red in 2028. Minnesota, long a bastion of Democratic support in presidential elections, showed signs of a shifting political landscape in 2024. Kamala Harris secured the state's 10 electoral votes with 51.1% of the vote, defeating Donald Trump, who garnered 46.9%. However, the 4.2% margin was significantly narrower than Joe Biden's 7.1% lead in 2020, and Trump flipped 4 counties previously won by Democrats. From a positive conservative perspective, this trend reflects growing enthusiasm for Republican values among Minnesotans, particularly in rural and suburban areas. This report summarizes the 2024 election, provides a brief history of Minnesota's voting patterns, explores why the state could turn red in 2028, and outlines the strategies needed to achieve this historic shift. Historical context. Minnesota's political history is rooted in its progressive traditions and evolving demographics. Admitted to the Union in 1858, the state initially leaned Republican, voting for the party in every presidential election from 1860 to 1928, except in 1912 when it supported progressive candidate Theodore Roosevelt. The Great Depression marked a pivotal shift, as Minnesota began favoring Democratic candidates, a trend solidified by the 1944 merger of the Democratic Party with the Progressive Minnesota Farmer Labor Party, forming the Democratic Farmer Labor (DFL) Party. Since 1976, Minnesota has voted Democratic in every presidential election, earning the distinction of the longest Democratic streak outside Washington, D.C. The last Republican to carry the state was Richard Nixon in 1972, during his landslide victory. Notable moments include 1984, when Minnesotans gave homegrown Senator Walter Mondale his only state in a lopsided loss to Ronald Reagan. However, recent elections have shown signs of change. In 2016, Trump came within 1.5 points of winning, and in 2020, Biden's margin was 7.1%. By 2024, the gap had narrowed to 4.2%, signaling growing Republican competitiveness. The 2024 presidential election, held on November 5, 2024, saw Minnesota remain in the Democratic column, but with a significantly reduced margin. Below are the key details. Election results. Candidate party votes. Percentage electoral votes. Kamala Harris, Democratic, 1,533,451.1%. 10 Donald Trump Republican, 1,408,171, 46.9% margin of victory, 4.2%, 125,230 votes. The closest since 2016. Turnout, 72.9% of eligible voters with over 4 million early votes cast. County flips, Trump flipped 4 counties, Carlton, Blue Earth, Nicollet, Winona, that Biden won in 2020, with Carlton voting Republican for the first time since 1928. Key events leading to the election primary elections. March 5, 2024. Democratic primary. Kamala Harris won overwhelmingly, with Tim Walz, Minnesota's governor, as her running mate, boosting Democratic turnout. Republican primary. Donald Trump secured the nomination with strong support. Walz's influence. Harris's selection of Walz was seen as a strategic move to solidify Minnesota's Democratic base, leveraging his local popularity and progressive record. Voter engagement. Both parties invested heavily in Minnesota, with Republicans focusing on rural and suburban areas and Democrats reinforcing urban strongholds. Factors contributing to the narrow margin. Several factors contributed to the reduced Democratic margin. Rural and suburban gains. Trump made significant inroads in greater Minnesota, a largely rural region, and flipped suburban counties like Blue Earth and Nicollet. Nearly every county shifted more Republican compared to 2020. Economic concerns. Voters prioritized economic stability, with Republicans emphasizing policies like the USMCA trade agreement, which supported Minnesota's agricultural sector. Voter turnout. Republicans improved their early voting and grassroots efforts, boosting turnout in key areas. National trends. The nationalization of politics aligned Minnesota voters with broader partisan divides, making the state more competitive. Why Minnesota could turn red in 2028. Minnesota's narrowing Democratic margins and growing Republican support suggest the state could flip in 2028. Several factors support this possibility. Demographic trends. Minnesota's population is diverse, with urban centers like Minneapolis and St. Paul contrasting with rural Greater Minnesota. The state's rural voters, particularly in the Iron Range and southeast Minnesota, have shifted away from the DFL, with cultural conservatives increasingly supporting Republicans. While urban areas remain Democratic strongholds, suburban counties like Blue Earth and Nicollet are showing signs of Republican growth. Engaging these suburban voters, along with minority communities, could tip the balance. Key voter groups. The following voter groups will be critical in 2028. Voter group key. Concerns potential Republican strategy. Rural voters. Agriculture, economic stability, trade policies. Promote USMCA benefits, support farm subsidies, and invest in rural infrastructure suburban families. Education, safety, taxes. Advocate school choice, community policing, and tax relief. Young voters, 18 to 29, jobs, housing affordability, education costs. Offer conservative solutions to economic challenges. Engage via digital platforms. Minority communities. Economic opportunity, education, community investment. Highlight job creation, support small businesses, and address urban concerns. Blue-collar workers. Job security, wages, manufacturing. Emphasize manufacturing, revitalization, and trade policies benefiting workers. Economic performance. Economic issues were central in 2024 and will likely remain so in 2028. If a Republican administration delivers on promises of economic growth, job creation, and agricultural support, it could resonate with Minnesotans. Policies promoting small businesses, infrastructure, and energy independence align with the state's economic priorities. Voter engagement. Republicans' success in mobilizing early voters in 2024 was a significant factor. Continuing to leverage early voting, absentee ballots, and grassroots campaigns will be essential. Engaging young voters through social media and addressing their concerns about jobs and housing could expand the Republican base. National political climate. The national political climate will influence Minnesota's 2028 outcome. A unified Republican Party with a compelling presidential candidate who champions conservative values, such as limited government, economic freedom, and national security, could appeal to Minnesotans. Conversely, Democratic mobilization in urban areas could keep the state competitive. Strategies to turn Minnesota red in 2028. To secure Minnesota in 2028, Republicans should focus on the following strategies. Engage rural and suburban voters. Continue promoting policies that support agriculture, such as trade agreements and farm subsidies. Invest in rural infrastructure to address local needs. Appeal to suburban voters with policies on education, safety, and tax relief, emphasizing school choice and community policing. Broaden the voter base. Reach out to urban and minority communities by addressing economic opportunity, education, and community investment. Highlight conservative successes in job creation and small business support. Engage young voters with solutions to housing affordability and education costs, using digital platforms for outreach. Field strong leadership. Select a presidential candidate who connects with Minnesotans on shared values like faith, family, and economic freedom. A candidate like J.D. Vance, who represents a new generation of conservative leadership, could inspire enthusiasm. Craft effective messaging. Contrast conservative principles with democratic policies, highlighting successes in economic growth, national security, and individual freedoms. Address concerns about government overreach and defend election integrity. Maximize voter turnout. Leverage early voting, absentee ballots, and grassroots campaigns to ensure high turnout among Republican supporters. Target key counties that have shown Republican gains, such as Carlton and Winona. Address urban challenges. While rural and suburban areas are critical, Republicans must make inroads in urban centers like Minneapolis and St. Paul. Addressing issues like crime, education, and economic development can attract urban voters. Challenges and considerations. While the outlook is promising, challenges remain. Minnesota's urban Democratic strongholds, particularly in the Twin Cities, account for a significant portion of the electorate. The DFL's progressive policies, such as paid family medical leave set to begin in 2026, could bolster Democratic support if well received. Additionally, debates over voter turnout strategies and election policies could influence outcomes. Republicans must balance their focus on rural and suburban voters with efforts to engage urban and minority communities to overcome these challenges. Conclusion: Minnesota's political landscape is evolving, with the 2024 election demonstrating a significant shift towards Republican competitiveness. The narrowing Democratic margin, county flips, and growing support in rural and suburban areas suggest that the state could turn red in 2028. By engaging key voter groups, promoting economic policies, and mobilizing their base, Republicans have a realistic opportunity to end Minnesota's Democratic streak. With strong leadership and effective messaging, conservatives can build on this momentum to achieve a historic victory in 2028, reshaping the state's political future.